Okay, everyone, we're back again for another deep dive. And this time, we are tackling a topic that pretty much everyone has an opinion on.
Definitely. I mean, who hasn't cursed those clock changes at least once or twice a year?
Exactly. So we're talking all about time, specifically time zones, daylight saving time, the whole shebang.
Yeah, we'll really dig deep into why the U.S. has the system it does, all the back and forth about DST, and what the future might actually hold.
Because this is something that could actually change in our lifetimes, potentially.
Absolutely. There's real momentum behind some of these proposals. So to really get a handle on this, we've pulled from a few different sources.
Right. We've got some great historical context from the Bureau of Transportation Statistics. That's the BTS.
And to see where things stand politically, we've got some recent coverage from Time magazine. They've been following the debates closely.
And just to round things out, we'll bring in a more global perspective using a report from CNBC.
Perfect. So buckle up, everyone, because we're about to go on a time-traveling adventure, starting way back before anyone even thought about standardized time zones.
Yeah. Like, close your eyes. Imagine North America in the 1800s, before there were cars, even before planes were a thing.
What did travel look like back then? What was it like trying to get from one city to another?
Trains.
Yeah,
Right. Lots and lots of trains.
exactly. Trains were the main mode of long-distance transportation.
And now imagine trying to coordinate train schedules when every single town basically kept its own time.
It's wild to think about, right? Because according to the BTS, before 1883, there were more than 144 local times across North America.
144.
Yeah, it was complete chaos.
Oh, I bet.
Can you imagine trying to catch a connecting train?
Forget about it. You'd be hopelessly lost.
You'd probably just give up and walk. And it wasn't just an inconvenience. The BTS actually points out that all this confusion led to missed connections, delays, and even collisions.
It's pretty obvious why things needed to change.
Absolutely. And when it comes to transportation, safety is paramount.
So who finally stepped up to sort out this mess?
Well, it wasn't the government at first. It was actually the railroad companies themselves.
Really?
Yep. In 1883, they decided, okay, enough is enough. We need some order here. So they created 4 standardized time zones across the continent.
Makes sense. They were the ones most directly impacted by the time chaos.
Exactly. It was purely out of necessity for them. And get this, it wasn't until 1918 that the U.S. government officially adopted a system of time zones.
So 35 years later, what prompted them to finally get on board?
Well, World War I had just ended, and it highlighted the importance of coordinated transportation, not just for trains, but for everything.
So the government was like, okay,
Yeah.
we need to get serious about this.
Exactly. And since the railroads had already laid the groundwork, the government basically formalized it. They established 5 standard time zones: Eastern, Central, Mountain, Pacific, and Alaska.
The ones we're all familiar with today.
For the most part, yeah. And the agency in charge of all this, the Interstate Commerce Commission, or ICC.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Given the whole transportation angle.
Right. But as transportation evolved and became even more complex after World War II, a new player emerged on the scene.
The Department of Transportation, the DOT.
Exactly. Established in 1966, the DOT took over the responsibility of regulating time zones. Because smooth, coordinated transportation is essential for commerce, for the economy, for just about everything.
So the DOT is basically the timekeeper of the United States.
You could say that. And today we actually have 9 time zones, including those for U.S. territories.
Wow. I didn't realize there were that many.
Yeah, we tend to focus on the continental U.S. But places like Hawaii, American Samoa, they all fall under the DOT's time jurisdiction.
And each of these time zones is linked to UTC, Coordinated Universal Time.
Yeah, yep. It's the global standard.
So that's how we got our time zones. Well, what about daylight saving time? That's a whole other can of worms.
Oh, yeah. That's where things get really interesting.
Yeah.
And wouldn't you know it, daylight saving time also became a legal requirement in the U.S. in 1966.
Same year the DOT was
Yeah.
created.
Yep. The Uniform Time Act made it official. And this act mandated a uniform system for DST, like when to spring forward, when to fall back, the whole 9 yards.
So that means states can't just decide to do their own thing with DST.
Nope. They can't change the dates or the duration of DST. But here's the kicker. They can choose to opt out of DST altogether.
Really?
Yeah. Hawaii and most of Arizona don't observe DST at all.
Interesting. I never knew that. So they're just chilling on standard time all year round.
Yep. They've basically said no thanks to the whole clock-changing business.
But why did anyone even come up with DST in the first place? It seems so arbitrary to just mess with the clocks twice a year.
Well, the origins are actually pretty quirky.
Oh, I bet.
Way back in 1895, a scientist in New Zealand named George Hudson, he proposed shifting the clocks to get more daylight hours in the summer. Why?
I'm going to guess it had something to do with science.
He was a bug enthusiast, and he wanted those extra daylight hours for bug hunting.
Really?
Yep, bug hunting.
That's amazing.
Mhm.
Okay, so bug hunting was the initial inspiration for messing with time.
Well, it was one inspiration. Then, in the early 1900s, a British builder named William Willett, he was really bothered by how much daylight was wasted in the summer
It
mornings.
was wasted.
Well, he saw it that way. He thought people should be up and about, enjoying those long summer evenings.
So what did he propose?
Shifting the clocks forward to give people more time for leisure activities in the evenings.
Interesting. And what were his favorite leisure activities?
He was a big fan of golf.
So this whole DST thing, it's all thanks to a bug enthusiast and a golfer.
In a way, yes.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
But they didn't actually see their ideas implemented in their lifetimes, right?
No, they didn't. The first real-world implementation of DST came during World War I.
Ah, makes sense. Wartime often forces innovation and changes.
Definitely. In 1916, Germany and Austria-Hungary adopted DST. But their reason was a bit more practical than bug hunting or golf.
I'm guessing it had something to do with the war effort.
You got it. They wanted to conserve energy, specifically coal. By reducing the need for artificial light in the evenings, those resources could then be used for war production.
Interesting. So DST was originally a wartime energy-saving measure.
That's right. And the UK and the US quickly followed suit.
It must have been a big adjustment for people to suddenly start changing their clocks.
I'm sure it was. But the perceived benefits outweighed the inconvenience at the time.
And were there any actual energy savings in the U.S.?
There were. According to reports from back then, the U.S. saved an estimated $2 million in gas bills in 1918 thanks to DST.
$2 million back then. That's got to be a huge amount of money in today's terms.
You're right. Adjusting for inflation, that's about $33 million today.
Wow.
But here's the thing. The impact of DST on energy consumption today, it's a lot less clear-cut.
Really?
Yeah. A study from 2017 found that DST only led to an average electricity reduction of 0.34%.
0.34%. That's barely anything.
It is pretty small. And in some places, particularly in hotter climates closer to the equator, DST might actually lead to an increase in energy use.
How so?
Well, think about it. Longer daylight hours in the evening means people are more likely to stay up later, run their ACs longer, so any potential savings from reduced lighting might be offset by increased AC use.
Oh, that makes sense.
So yeah, the energy-saving argument for DST, it doesn't really hold up as well today as it did back in the early 1900s.
It seems like a lot of things have changed since then.
They have, and now we're seeing a pretty big push to get rid of DST altogether.
Oh, yeah. That debate's been raging for a while now.
It has.
Hey.
And it's gotten pretty heated in some circles.
I've seen so many online polls, so many articles. It seems like everyone has a strong opinion about it.
It's definitely a hot-button issue, and it's even reached the political arena. Time magazine recently reported on a post by Donald Trump on Truth Social. He expressed his intention for the Republican Party to eliminate DST.
Wow.
Yeah. He called it inconvenient and very costly to the nation.
So there's definitely political will to make a change. But what are the options on the table?
According to David Perot, an expert interviewed by Time, there are basically three main paths forward. One, we could stick with the current system, spring forward, fall back, the way we've been doing it.
Option 2.
Make daylight saving time permanent, no more switching back and forth.
And option 3.
Go with permanent standard time year-round.
So essentially pick a time and stick with it.
Exactly. No more clock chaos.
It's funny, though. The U.S. actually tried permanent DST before, back in 1974, during the energy crisis.
Yep. But it didn't go so well.
What happened?
People hated those dark winter mornings. Imagine waking up for work or school in complete darkness for months.
Ugh. Yeah, I can see why that wouldn't fly.
So it was repealed within a year.
That's a pretty clear sign that permanent DST might not be the best solution.
You'd think so. But there's still some support for it. There's actually a bipartisan bill called the Sunshine Protection Act that aims to make DST permanent.
So that whole dark mornings thing isn't a deal breaker for everyone.
Apparently not. But the American Academy of Sleep Medicine, that's the AASM, they're strongly in favor of permanent standard time.
What's their reasoning?
They argue that standard time aligns better with our natural sleep-wake cycles, our circadian rhythms.
That makes sense. Messing with our internal clocks can't be good for us.
Exactly. And they've cited studies linking DST to increased risks of things like car accidents, strokes, even hospital admissions.
Wow, that's pretty serious.
It is, and it makes sense. Disrupting our sleep patterns can have all sorts of negative consequences for our health and well-being.
So permanent standard time seems like the healthier option, but wouldn't that mean shorter summer evenings?
That's the trade-off. Sunsets would happen an hour earlier under permanent standard time, and a lot of people really enjoy those long summer evenings.
That's true. It's a tough call. What's the rest of the world doing about DST?
It's kind of a mixed bag globally. The European Union actually voted to scrap DST back in 2019, but they haven't fully implemented that decision yet.
So they're still switching back and forth for now.
For now, yeah. And some countries like China and Japan have never observed DST at all.
Interesting. And what about here in North America? Is there any variation within Canada or Mexico?
Absolutely. In Canada, some provinces observe DST while others don't. And in Mexico, it varies by region as well.
So even within countries, there's no real consensus on this?
Not really, no.
It seems like the effects of DST are pretty complicated too.
Oh, yeah. The research is all over the place. There are studies suggesting that DST might lead to fewer traffic accidents after dark, but then others show a spike in fatal crashes right after the fall time change.
So it's not a clear-cut win for safety either way.
Nope. And there's also evidence that DST could increase the risk of heart attacks and strokes after the spring forward, but then a decrease after the fallback.
So it's good for our hearts in the fall, but bad in the spring.
It seems that way, yeah. And there's even research linking the end of DST in the fall to a rise in depressive episodes.
This is making my head spin.
It's a lot to take in. And on top of all that, DST can also impact things like TV viewership and retail activity.
So it affects our health,
Yeah.
our safety, and our economy.
Exactly. It's all intertwined.
But if the research is so inconclusive, what's the main driver behind the push to ditch DST?
It seems like a lot of it comes down to the simple inconvenience of changing the clocks.
The actual act of springing forward and falling back.
Exactly. A lot of polls suggest that it's the transition itself that people dislike the most, not necessarily the distribution of daylight hours.
Because some people might actually like having more daylight in the evening, even if it means darker mornings.
Right. And others might prefer the opposite.
So it's really about personal preference and how our bodies respond to the time shifts.
Yep. And those responses can vary depending on where you live, too.
How so?
Well, the further you are from the equator, the more drastic the difference in daylight hours between summer and winter.
Ah, so people in those regions experience the effects of DST much more intensely.